Who wouldn't want a better world? A world without inequality, or a world in which nobody's left behind?
The communist slogan was to bring equality to people.
I think people are attracted, justifiably attracted, by the idea of creating a fairer life for the disadvantaged.
One of the attractions of 21st century socialism is the transformation of society, but also it had a transnational perspective.
Communism is a powerful ideology, a vision for a fairer world, a classless society. Dreamed up by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in 1848, it was carved into history in the Communist Manifesto and brought to life for the first time in the Soviet Union. Throughout the 20th century, communism spread. Radical Marxists ignited movements and revolutions around the globe, reshaping nations and inspiring generations. But what is the communist mission? How has it been tried? And what is its future? In order to answer these questions, we will hear from experts, historians, and those who have lived under communist regimes. We will look at the example of the People's Republic of China, the longest-running communist government, Venezuela, a modern example of radical socialism in the 21st century, and the theory itself, exploring its popularity today.
My name is Li Skuland. I was born in China 1958 and lived 26 years under Mao's regime. The Chinese Communist Party, they had a great intention to help the poor because at that time, majority of Chinese were really, really poor.
The Chinese Communist Party is the longest-running communist government in history, spanning 8 decades. But it had its origins in 1919.
The Chinese Communist Party started in Shanghai with a group of scholars studying the Marxist and Leninist text. And they were funded by a foreign power, namely Russia, what became the Soviet Union. And the Chinese communists were told that they had to start a revolution among the proletariat in China.
As the party was formed, a devoted young man emerged as a crusader for Marxist ideologies, Mao Zedong. Mao was born in a rapidly changing China in 1893. He grew up working on his family's farm, but remained notoriously studious, reading at every spare moment he could find. His father was a prosperous grain dealer, but Mao would soon come to challenge the very structures that sustained his family. In his 20s, Mao took part in socialist and revolutionary publications, organizations, and activism. His protests led him to face arrests and confrontations with local authorities. He would soon put his ideas into action, helping to found the Chinese Communist Party. Subsequent decades saw China in political upheaval and civil unrest. Amid this chaos, Mao and his Red Army built their base. By 1945, World War II had reshaped the global landscape, and China emerged from its shadows with the communists and nationalists fighting for the soul of the nation. A civil war raged until 1949. Eventually, Mao's ability to mobilize the peasantry and the errors of the nationalists culminated in a resounding victory for the communists. The People's Republic of China was born, with Mao at its helm.
Mao Zedong gave this speech declaring the foundation of the People's Republic of China, and then the Chinese could start in earnest their revolution.
Mao envisaged a China reborn, free from the grip of imperialism and feudal states. He imagined a land of harmony, where the peasant and the worker, once sidelined by society, were the most respected. His vision was of more than just economic change. It was a cultural and social rebirth, a nation unified in purpose and spirit.
The first thing the Communist Party did was to deliver their promise to confiscate the land from the landowners and redistribute to the landless. But actually, in reality, what they did was they confiscated the land from the landowners, but they did not redistribute the land. They held the land to themselves, so it became government properties.
Mao Zedong began following the policies which had been followed by Lenin after the October Revolution, which essentially meant they started nationalizing all assets, restricting the movement of people, abolishing markets, abolishing private farming, and closing down internal trade and external trade.
Mao's plan was that everyone would work the land and share the harvest with all of those in need. Like the Bolsheviks in Russia, he hoped to forcibly accelerate the largely agrarian Chinese economy into a thriving industrial economy. He developed a 5-year plan for the country, an ambitious, large-scale promise for Marx's vision to be delivered in China.
One of the things the new Soviet leadership told the Chinese communists, including Mao, quite directly, Khrushchev came and told them explicitly, do not follow the collectivization model that Stalin adopted because it was a disaster for us and millions of people starved to death.
Undeterred by Khrushchev's warnings, Mao pressed on, launching the Great Leap Forward.
The Great Leap Forward was the attempt of the Chinese government trying out the communist economic plant system.
Mao rapidly encouraged the formation of local communes combining resources and labor, a decision that was not welcomed by all.
The peasants were forced to hand over their livestock and their tools into these collectives, and many of them began slaughtering their own animals rather than hand them over.
The desperation not to join the collectivized farming model was quickly crushed by Mao. But he had realized that his communist regime needed a greater vision to get the country on board. He needed a vision that would put China at the front of the world stage. Mao saw that leading industrial nations were growing on the back of great steel production. So he commanded that China produce steel at a pace that would astonish the world. This wasn't just about economics. It was a symbolic march towards self-sufficiency and global prominence.
The goal is to produce more steel per year than Great Britain and United States, so China can become the world leading economic power. And the funniest thing was making the steels, because everybody's supposed to make steel, but nobody knew how to. I remember they asked everybody bring iron product from their house. For example, doorknobs, walks, and knives, whatever, made of steel and iron. Bring them to their workplace, and they melt them down and pretend that's a production of steel. But of course, there's nothing near the production they are aiming.
From students to factory workers, everyone was mobilized, melting down pots, pans, and any scrap metal they could find, aiming to bolster national steel production overnight. This grassroots approach was emblematic of Mao's belief in people-powered progress. But his socialist vision struggled to become a reality yet again. Instead of high-quality steel, these makeshift furnaces often produced low-grade metal. This was one of Mao's first big failings, and for the Chinese people, things were about to get even worse.
Right after the Great Leap Forward, China had 3 years of Great Famine, 1960 to 1963.
The origins of the Great Famine in China were intertwined with a web of deception and misinformation. Every commune was required to hand over large quotas of grain from their harvest. Each year, with pressure from the government, these communes reported more exaggerated harvest yields. The state taxed the peasants based on these inflated figures, a move that effectively confiscated their entire harvest. As the cruel irony of this miscalculation unraveled, the farmers found themselves without grain for the next sowing season. Hunger grew, but so did the propaganda from Mao's Communist Party.
Until today, the Chinese textbook or history book call it 3 years of natural disasters. When the food production was getting low, they didn't think that's because of the plant economy. They blamed the birds. The birds would eat the crops, they said. So the whole country started to kill birds. I remember all the kids, we would use everything we had to make noise so the birds couldn't rest, couldn't come back to their nest to rest. So the birds just kept flying until they were so tired and dropped dead. And we counted how many we turned into the authority and to receive reward. So when all the birds were killed, insects came back. But without the birds, the insect became disasters, destroyed more food than ever. The cause of the Great Famine was not natural disaster, it was a human disaster. It's caused by the plant economy.
As harvests dwindled, desperate measures arose. Mao was unwilling to admit the systemic failures and continued to lay blame elsewhere.
One of the most haunting things that I came across was that cannibalism was rife during the Great Leap Forward. People who could not get enough to eat and knew they were dying started exchanging their children with other families in order to eat these children because they could not eat their own children. So cannibalism was not only a shocking memory for these people, but it was also documented in material in party archives.
I saw people laying on the sidewalk. I don't even know they're dead or not. They were too hungry. They have no energy. They couldn't even walk.
To the best of our knowledge, we think that between 30 and 45 million people died of starvation or persecution during the Great Leap Forward. It was the greatest man-made famine in history. So the party mounted a propaganda campaign to persuade people that these new methods and these collective farms actually worked. And they might have had private suspicions, but if you challenged Mao's word, you would be arrested and your family would be persecuted, and in many cases you would die.
Those wanted to challenge the authority and the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, many of them went missing, or at least being charged, being put in jail for many different reasons.
As the nation grappled with internal turmoil, a contrasting narrative was being spun to the world outside. Newspapers painted the picture of a rejuvenated China, a beacon of progress and prosperity. But this propaganda parade pushed well beyond stories of a thriving economy. The Chinese Communist Party now wanted to rewrite the country's history, a cultural revolution.
Cultural Revolution was a popular movement initiated to erase political opposition and also do culture cleansing.
Before 1949, they called it the Old Society. After 1949, called New Society. Everything old need to be destroyed. Any books, religion, art, and the most important was way of thinking. They want to get rid of.
So he wanted to just wipe out Chinese history and all the traditions, any paintings you had, any clothing, you desperately tried to get rid of this. Everything from the past had to go.
In that period of time, if you were more liberal, more westernized, or even have the wrong upcoming, for example, you are a son of a landlord, you would be criticized or even sentenced to death.
Mao and the Communist Party of China segregated the society into red and black. Red means illiterate and poor. Black is the opposite, landowners, rich, educated, doesn't agree with communism. For me, I never had any money. I wasn't educated yet, but because I was born into a family 3-4 generations ago, they were educated and rich, so I was born black. And for the black people, we don't have most of the privileges the red people enjoy. For example, at school, we couldn't participate in extracurricular activities. And the red people can do whatever they want to us, beat us up, take our things. We have no right, nothing to say.
The segregation of the red loyalists and the marginalized black citizens was more than just symbolic. It played out in the everyday lives of Chinese people, systematically oppressing those branded black. Mao's cultural revolution was in full force, and he pushed ahead with his indoctrination, condensing his thoughts and visions for the future into a powerful manifesto, his Little Red Book.
One of the things that Mao was brilliant at was propaganda. And these ideas of Mao were then incorporated in this red book, which everybody had to study and memorize. And this became a badge of loyalty.
The Little Red Book is the symbol of the idolization and the worshipping of the Chinese leader, Mao Zedong. And it portrays an image of him that is a godlike one, that every single word of his speech cannot be challenged.
It became kind of like a Bible-like. And yeah, we were all required to memorize it.
For these people to show their loyalty and support his faction of the party, they waved this red book and they wore these Mao badges and they obeyed his command to go and arrest and attack his enemies within the party and the whole of society. So one of the things that he did was to ban all foreign learning whatsoever and to attack teachers who had a kind of sacred status in Chinese culture. So students were encouraged to, even in primary school, to gang up against their teachers and to beat them up and humiliate them on stage. Many of them, professors and teachers, were beaten to death by their own students.
People were so brainwashed. It's known that one school, the student took their principal and the teacher to a riverside and killed them and took their liver and heart out, went back to the school and gave it to the cafeteria and cooked it. All the pupils in the school ate it. It's all documented.
Mao's mission was to indoctrinate the Chinese people with communist propaganda. He shut down all educational institutions across the country. There was to be only one voice, his voice.
So you had this whole generation which was completely immersed in this crazy Maoist ideology with no education and no knowledge of the outside world.
Mao couldn't keep the country in this trance forever. His failed policies had scarred the nation. As support for him declined, so too did his health. Mao Zedong's ascent to power had been founded in a hope for the future that many believed would usher in a new era of equality and prosperity. His vision had tragically spiraled into a nightmare of hunger, fear, and repression. It was a devastation that Mao Zedong would never see his beloved country recover from. In 1976, Mao Zedong died, leaving behind a legacy riddled with revolution, ambition, and the chilling memories of the lives lost in its wake. This was a legacy that wasn't confined by China's borders. Throughout Mao's reign, China had been a silent architect, subtly laying the foundation for communism's spread on the global stage. China's strategy wasn't just about self-preservation. It was about fostering international alliances.
The Communist Party of China didn't want to just brainwash their own people. They want to export their communist doctrines and control the economy throughout the world.
In the name of communism, the Chinese Communist Party funded governments and provided military aid to revolutionary movements. From the jungles of Southeast Asia to the vast plains of Africa, Beijing's hand was prominent. China was Albania's closest ally during its split with the Soviet Union. In Vietnam, China supported the Viet Cong during the war. In Tanzania, infrastructure projects built by China fueled the country's socialist drive. In Angola, China supported the Marxist-Leninist movement during the Civil War. Beijing backed communist coups, training militants and rebels in guerrilla warfare, and spreading propaganda. China's influence was felt significantly in South America, where socialism had become more than just a political choice. For many, it was seen as an answer to centuries of colonial exploitation and stark income inequality. The spread of communism reaches all the way to the modern day, where, in Venezuela, a new 21st century communism was born.
In the 20th century, Venezuela was already one of the richest countries in Latin America, with the largest known oil reserves in the world.
A large amount of the country's wealth was generated by one company, PDVSA, the country's oil conglomerate. PDVSA wasn't just a business, it was the backbone of Venezuela's economy and a symbol of the country's potential. But many felt that the huge oil profits weren't being redistributed fairly. The majority of Venezuelans still struggled.
Communism in Venezuela is not something that happened by chance. But people who were so angry about the situation of the country, the inequality, and all the things that were going on in Venezuela because of democracy had some failures at that moment.
Discontent brewed, social divisions deepened. And amidst this turmoil, a young military officer's voice began to resonate with those feeling marginalized. Hugo Chávez wasn't born into the elite circles of Caracas. Growing up in a humble house in Sabaneta, he knew firsthand the sting of inequality. As he matured both politically and ideologically, Chavez found a mentor in Fidel Castro, Cuba's iconic leader. The two shared more than just a political ideology. They bonded over a vision of Latin America that was free from foreign intervention.
He's a president sculpted and molded by communist Cuba. He described Castro as his mentor. He spent a lot of his military career training in Cuba, where he was exposed to the revolutionary ideas of Marx and Engels.
In 1992, Chavez led a failed socialist coup which landed him in jail. He used this time to speak to the media from behind bars, establishing himself in the South American political scene as a revolutionary. When he was released 2 years later, Chavez embarked on a national tour, rallying the masses with his charismatic speeches, promising sweeping reforms and championing the causes of the poor. His popularity surged. He was no longer just a former coup leader. He was emerging as a beacon of hope for many Venezuelans. Chavez's campaign gained momentum, captivating the hearts and minds of a significant portion of the population. The people desired change, and Chavez promised to deliver it using the vast oil wealth of the country to fund his Marxist revolution.
What he came to offer people is that he was going to do a remodel of everything, and now it was going to be a lot more fair to the people, and a lot of the poverty that we began developing, he was going to stop that.
Hugo Chávez had a plan to make Venezuela a communist country. With the same hope and vision that all revolutionary leaders have, he dreamed of a better life for Venezuelans.
In December 1998, with a staggering 56% of the vote, Hugo Chávez was elected president.
After Chavez won in 1998 and began his ruling in 1999, he begins to change the system.
One of the ABCs of the communism book is that the first thing you do is you grab power and you take the means of production into your control. So once he's in power, he very quickly calls the National Assembly, what would be the equivalent of the legislative power in Venezuela, to draw a new constitution.
First, he called for a change of the constitution that give him more power and the opportunity of re-electing himself. And at that moment, also extended the presidential period to 6 years and do all the changes.
After ensuring his power with the new constitution, Chavez began to build a new social system.
And part of that new order would be government control of the country's biggest industry, the oil industry.
This constitutional reform had the intention of transforming the oil industry into a clear political arm of the regime.
True to the teachings of the Communist Manifesto, Chavez took control of the means of production. His nationalization spree in the early 2000s pushed out all private enterprise. But it also starved industries of expertise and investment and sent the economy into a downward spiral.
In the early 2000s, Chavez, honoring his campaign pledge, took control of PDVSA. He ousted its senior leadership and installed his trusted communist allies in their place.
Eddie Ramírez, director gerente hasta el día de hoy de Palmavén. Pa' afuera.
With PDVSA firmly under state control, oil revenues began to funnel directly into Chavez's ambitious social programs. This redistribution of wealth from the nation's prime industry followed the teachings of Marx and Engels to the letter. Around the world, people were looking to Venezuela, as they had at the start of the Soviet Union and at the start of Mao's China, excited to see communism implemented.
Well, it's at that point about 2005 where we began hearing about the socialism of the 21st century.
Who is leading the struggle to build that socialism here in our 21st century. Please welcome the President of Venezuela, Hugo Chávez.
It became a very catchy word, of course. You could get on in a taxi in New York and the taxi driver would ask you, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Venezuela. And he would turn around and say, ah, Chavez, great. The impact of that phrase, 21st century socialism, had global effects.
The term 21st century socialism began echoing across Venezuela's airwaves.
Aló, presidente.
Chavez's weekly show, Aló, Presidente, wasn't just any political broadcast. It was a masterclass in political theater, where Chavez sang, laughed, danced, and, most crucially, pitched his socialist ideals to the masses.
Chavez tried to impress all the time. He wants to show that he has this charm and this personality. He became a very good communicator, very popular communicator. He had TV programs, radio programs.
Under Chavez's administration, the media landscape of Venezuela underwent a seismic shift. While state-controlled channels sang praises of the government and its socialist endeavors, dissenting voices often found themselves muzzled, their broadcast licenses revoked. For many Venezuelans, their evening television routine became a window into Chavez's socialist dream. But as the lines blurred between state messaging and independent journalism, it also posed questions about the nature of freedom and democracy in this new socialist era.
They not only tried to do their own channels and radios, a form of alternative fake news information, but they had to control the remaining ones and take them over to have a single one narrative of events and reality.
So now you have Chavez with a big platform and a big agenda to make Venezuela a communist country. And you start to see the same problems as the Soviet Union and China and everywhere else that communism has been tried. Disinformation, violence, the economy becomes distorted and inefficient. But like those before him, instead of slowing down, he speeds up the communist revolution.
While Chavez controlled the media, Venezuelans could see the effect of socialism around them. Their TV screens showed hope and prosperity, but on the streets, they could see the truth.
By the year 2010, 2011, that was the perfect storm. Oil prices crashing down, Chavez was sick.
The economy couldn't cope with that. I mean, and that's when people began actually seeing their poverty. And if you measure it in terms of what people eat, they began losing weight.
Many people have seen the images of Venezuelans eating out of bins and trash. It is often known of families that had to decide which member of the family ate today.
Suddenly, job scarcity hit, with many barred from working in their trained fields or at all. The socialist system failed once more, leading to unrest driven by hunger and disillusionment with the unfulfilled promise of communism. Venezuela needed its leader more than ever, but behind closed doors, Chavez was suffering from a severe cancer. He was seen less and less at the public engagements that he was once at the center of. Despite the ongoing chaos, he called for an election and ran for another term as president.
Instead of changing the reality of the country got worse and worse and worse.
Really, the economy wasn't working at all.
Chavez won the election in 2012, but just a few months later, the state announced his death.
But waiting to take power, there was another follower of the communist promise of equality for all, Nicolas Maduro.
Maduro was handpicked by Chavez to continue the Bolivarian revolution. The son of a prominent union boss in Caracas, he had risen through a lifetime in left-wing politics. He wasn't merely a blind follower, he was a trusted torchbearer, ensuring the Bolivarian dream would endure. Maduro continues to pursue Chavez's vision for 21st century socialism today.
The best way to show that it hasn't worked is the amount of people that have left the country. Roughly 1/5 of the population have left. 1/5.
From the violence in Venezuela, from crime, and the violence from the government, more than 500,000 people die in the times of Chavez Maduro. Venezuela passed from being 24% poverty levels in 1998, when Chavez was elected, to 93-94% of poverty level now. That's the effect of communism in Venezuela.
In almost all of the countries in which it has been tried, communism has now been forced to drop the very economic policies that define it. What is left in Venezuela, in China, in Russia, are the legacies of past communist experiments.
In many ways, the mentality that ruled Russia under communism not only persisted after Stalin's death, but continued, and have continued right through to the present day.
It is important to talk about what we would call a legacy piece in the former Soviet Union. And unfortunately, we see the effects of communism lingering. And then Putin comes in. And although one individual doesn't, in the end, control everything, one individual can make quite a difference.
I understand Putin's mind very well because I was studying in school with him. We had the same teachers, and the whole self-esteem and self-identity of Putin was built on this notion of greatness of military victory of the Soviet Union.
And so Putin, he's raised in the Soviet Union, and he thinks that this was when Russia was great. He and his closest followers look upon the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And so even though it doesn't seem that Vladimir Putin himself is learned in every little thing about Marx and Lenin, he is somebody who was shaped by, formed by, educated in the Soviet Union.
The communists want the entire country, 1.4 billion people, think only one way. Mao did, Xi Jinping is doing the same thing.
In today's China, I think the most significant impact of the communism is the centralization and the monopoly of power, especially political power in the Chinese Communist Party. They basically control all aspects of the society. They implement a very strict internet firewall and also media control. I think this is the biggest legacy of what communism left in mainland China.
In addition to all of the examples of repression and oppression, politically, economically, culturally, every way, more than 100 million people have been killed by communist regimes since 1917. That's something that should make people take notice. It's more than those that were killed in World War I and World War II combined.
Despite the history of communism, the allure of Marx's principles continue to convince the world. Today, socialism is viewed favorably by more than 3/4 of young people. Perhaps it is not surprising. Burdened with student debts, facing skyrocketing housing prices, and grappling with income inequality, there is hope in the promise that communism might be the silver bullet that will fix all of the world's problems. While many people today champion the tenets of communism, it's often from a place of idealism, unburdened by lived experience.
A lot of people still think it's a utopia. It's a beautiful world. But for people like me, live through it, I knew the outcome of communism. Not only we were starving, we have no life, and also we're not even treated as human beings.
It's commonly said that there's been no such thing as real communism, that country after country that becomes communist. That's not real communism, people say, when they see the failures. Real communism involves accepting that violence is the only way in which the new society can be built. There is no other way to speed up and see through revolution, Marx said, except by revolutionary terror. He wrote that in the same year as the Communist Manifesto was published. So if you're going to accept the Communist Manifesto as your model, then accept too that its thinker, its writer, was at the same time endorsing that level of bloodshed.
I view the world as a Venezuelan from the perspective of what has happened to us. What happens when a country attempts to forcibly change the political system and to crush the freedom of individuals? If you haven't had that experience, I can see how communism could be attractive. I hope that Venezuela serves as an example for future generations to know that communism is not just a bad idea in practice, it's a bad idea in theory.
What would you say to someone who calls themselves a socialist or a communist who hasn't lived under a communist regime?
Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what your country can do to you. My life told me what the country can do to me.
The history of communism is a cautionary tale. As it is reborn into mainstream culture, we must remember the honest hope and vision that was part of the beginnings of communist regimes of the past. With its promise of equality and brotherhood, for many, the pursuit of communism may be more appealing today than ever. But intertwined with that drive is a complex story of aspirations, failures, and devastation. After all, the pages of history are written not by ideologies, but by the choices we make in their name.